Welcome into another edition of Her Playbook. My name is Madelyn Burke, and I'm thrilled to be joined by a woman who has been on the NFL sidelines longer than anyone else in this industry. 29 seasons about to be. Pam Oliver joining the program. When you hear that, Pam, I can see the joy and the wow, 29
It
NFL
is
seasons.
crazy. It is so crazy. And first of all, that makes me really tired when I hear that number. It's flown by. I talk to a lot of my friends who are in this business, and I think life in general, you just seem like everything's on this fast pace. And I never saw myself, being at one spot for 29 years. You never see that. You know the business, you know how it goes.
Right.
You're kind of one contract away from staying or going. And I don't know how many people understand that, but it works. It's a business, and, you could be in one cycle and out the next. And that's television. That's the way it goes. I'm sure you know that pretty well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, there's a lot of moving pieces, but that consistency and that stability is such a unique element of your career. But I want to go back to the origin story. I mean, you grew up, you were an athlete growing up. What drew you to this vocation and this career path? How did you know that this is something you wanted to do?
I knew early. I was a news junkie when I was growing up. Starting very, very young, I used to love to watch the local news at 6 o'clock. I would stop everything I'm doing, run in the house, because I was really excited to see the inaction stuff. Let's go out to the scene and with so and so, and just the pace and the movement. It was something that attracted me really, really early. And then I started participating in sports when I was around 8, 9 years old. Just local stuff, summer baseball, softball at that point. We weren't allowed to play baseball at that point. But just getting involved with that way. And I fell in love with sports, hook, line, and sinker, the Olympics, just all sorts of events. Of course, the Super Bowl, football, baseball. It was not a matter of looking at it and saying, well, I'm a female and this only pertains to me. I would jump out and play baseball with the guys in a minute, people my age, and they weren't excited to see me, but I was out there. And so that's how it all started for me at a very young age, and it just stuck.
Yeah. And I mean, you're no slouch of an athlete. Your track and field background has you in, I believe, your Collegiate Hall of Fame.
In my school's Hall of Fame.
Yes, that is incredible accomplishment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had a great time. That collegiate athletic arena, I think you have to treat it like a job. It's like you finish your classes and you go and you work out for 2 or 3 hours. You do those 2-a-days in the fall. And it just sets you up. I also was able to parlay that into working in the sports athletic department and using those opportunities to write stories, to string stories for the Orlando Sentinel. So I made sure, and that's something I tell young women and young men today, is just kind of find a way to immerse yourself in that area so you can prep and be kind of ahead of the game when it's all said and done. But just having that ability to participate at those levels, really key and very helpful to me later.
Absolutely. And especially to knowing how to, take care of yourself, take care of your body, recover on that level as an athlete has to be useful tools in this grind of an NFL season, when you're traveling, when you're on the move, when you're, kind of keeping up with so many different things, both physically and mentally. How does one prepare for an NFL season on the sidelines when you're traveling coast to coast all over the country to cover it?
It never stops. You work a game Sunday, you know this, girl.
Yeah.
You work the game on Sunday. Then someone gave me the worst advice, is to try to take Monday to decompress. And I tried that a couple of times. I spent the week just trying to catch up. You have to read constantly. It doesn't stop. And, it's something that for me, I still prepare the same way. I haven't, am I working smart? Am I just, working harder? What's that saying?
Work smarter, not harder, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's it. But I find that I only have one gear, and that's just, full steam ahead and preparing for these teams. It's just tons of information every single week to get prepared for Sunday. And that could amount to 2 reports, it could amount to 4 reports, sometimes cutting room floor, a lot of cutting room floor information. So, but you've gotta know it. And
Absolutely. Yeah.
that prep is huge.
Well, because you mentioned there's so much information that's left on the cutting room floor, but you never know if there's going to be a game with a weather delay or something like that. And it's like, all right, Pam, you've got to fill all this time. What do you got to tell us?
That happen, and I've had that happen a couple of times. Let's go to Pam. I'm like, for what? It's a little weather delay, and beyond that, what's next? But yeah, you've got to be prepared for it all. I worked a game, not the Super Bowl in New Orleans, but there was a game at MetLife. And it was, the lights went out just briefly, and guys are ducking for cover, and that was one of those times where you're completely away from the game and you're focusing on the atmosphere. And those are really kind of fun because you have to throw it all aside and report.
Yeah.
Good old-fashioned reporting. So that's a fun thing too.
Yeah, because that's the other thing too. It's like with every game, you've covered over 500 NFL games, and every single one of them, I'm sure, that is so many games. That is such an accomplishment. And every single one of them is a story in and of itself. I'm sure you go in, you prepare, and you say this, and this is what I'm going to talk about. And inevitably, there's always a plot twist, right?
There's always a plot twist. And, the injuries, you don't know when injuries are coming. So you have to immediately pivot into, this guy can be a key figure to the defense, for example, and he goes out and you need to know who's coming in behind him, a few nuggets about the person that's, coming in to fill that void. And that's where the preparation comes in. You have to know, just be prepared for really anything out there. Just knowing that they're counting on you to have that information to fill in, that is something that keeps you on your toes. And you're like, hey, I can't believe I know this, but I can feel it. Can't believe it. I don't know where I read it, but I know I read it, and you can fill in the blanks. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I imagine too, a lot of that is learning to not only learn how to prepare, but trust your own preparation, right? Because sometimes, you'll be standing there like, I'm pretty sure this is right. Is this right? I hope it's right. And but, with such a pro like yourself, I'm sure you've gotten that down to a science. Over the course of your career, when you look back, I always think, personally, I feel like I learned more from the mistakes I've made than the successes.
Sure.
Is there a moment that you're like, okay, this is something that I learned so much from that I can share with other people who look to follow in my footsteps?
You know what? I don't know how much you know about my background, but I started in news. I couldn't get a job in sports. Such did not exist. Back in, when I started in the early 80s, so I took a news job and I said, it's all television. So I'm going to, throw everything into this, and, did gubernatorial campaigns, murder trials, that 11 o'clock, it's just fast paced. And so I learned a lot. My first job, I covered agriculture. Now, what do you know about agriculture? Do you know anything about it? But you know what?
Yeah.
They hired you, so you better figure it out. And, that's one of my mottos. If you don't know, you better figure it out, and quickly. So I learned a lot in those early days. I went from Albany, Georgia, to Huntsville, Alabama, to Buffalo, New York, and then to Tampa, where I went from news to sports. And I wasn't anticipating that move even happening. I'd given up on sports. I said, this is just not going to happen for me. Mm-hmm. So I, immersed myself and grew to love news, even though it takes a toll. It takes a toll on your psyche. Just mentally, it's draining. Emotionally, it's draining, because a lot of time the news is bad. And then an opportunity popped up at my same station in Tampa, and I had to be talked into it because I was like, oh, at this point, I'm kind of getting this news thing down. And people were like, my friends were like, Pam, you've talked about this for years. And you mean to tell me you're not going to jump in and, now while you've got this opportunity? And I went to my news director. He said, I think this is the biggest mistake. Nobody will ever hear your name again. And Bob Franklin told me that. But it worked out pretty well for me.
I think it did. I think it definitely did. It worked out. I feel like a few people have heard your name since then, and in a great way. And in a great way. That is an incredible journey, and there's so many forks in the road that we come to, of course, in our own growth and our own journeys. And you cover so many athletes, so many games. You talked about the injuries too. That's a big part of the game. But you've been very candid too about things that you've dealt with, your migraines especially being something that is a hurdle for you. You talk about athletes playing hurt, but broadcasters play hurt too sometimes. What goes into that for you, and what's that struggle been like in your career?
I'm going to tell you the truth. I missed a couple of games because the migraine was just so intense. I couldn't focus. I get a little, my vision goes a little bit, and I thought it would be detrimental to the team, my broadcast team, and to me to kind of push through it. But there have been millions of other times that I have pushed through it. I get, I'm maybe 2 within a span of 14 days. That's typically my pattern. Yes, but it's gotten so much better. I found a medication that the minute I start feeling poorly, I take this medication. You get sick before you get better, but it started to work beautifully for me, and I've been migraine-free for about 3 months.
Oh, that's incredible.
I hope I never have to worry about if I'm going to be able to put in the work. I remember I had a game, Giant Stadium. I forget who they were playing. I think the 49ers. And I woke up in the middle of the night, and all the familiar things going on with the nausea, the sensitivity to light. And so about 4:00 in the morning, I started running around knowing that I had to get to urgent care or ER or something like that. And I knew it was time to, but I worked the game, and I was so proud of myself for doing that because it's not easy. As anybody who suffers knows, it's like needles, being put into your eye or something. So I'm encouraged, put it that way.
Well, and and that just shows like the strength and the ability of someone being able to push through. And I'm sure it helps you relate, especially in these conversations that you have with these players post game, guys who do pull it together and play hurt and do kind of have to show up and make that decision of, can I help my team in this setting? You know that feeling very well. And that's, and talk a little bit about what it's like for you building these relationships with these players over the decades and how that process is and what the key to that is for you.
I think the key is, why only talk to guys when you need something? Ask about their families. I'm curious about things anyway. Ask about their families. What are their goals? What are some of the things, that they're looking forward to? You know it well, because a guy can be the hottest thing, and then he's just, he's had this devastating knee or ankle injury, and is he out to pasture? And I think knowing their personal stories, not always wanting something from them, just to be able to talk about their lives. I'm just as curious about what's going on with them off the field as things go on the field. We're all seeing their performances, and but to me, how are your kids? How's your family? Those things matter in building relationships, but you got to be curious about it.
Right.
And I'm real in that sense, and they know that they can trust me with information. If things are off the record, boy, you better you better, adhere to that. And it has to be sacrosanct in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, these guys, it's a matter of building trust. That's what I always tell these young people. Just, not always, what's the key to the game? Really, you're going to ask them that question 3 hours before kickoff. Those are during the week questions. You don't want to bother guys with that.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And it's also a reminder too to fans out there. Like so often fans look at athletes as, oh, this guy, what has he done on my fantasy team? Or how is this impacting my team? Whatever. And it's like, everyone has their own. Yeah, exactly. They're people. And telling the stories and what you do and telling the stories and humanizing all these players' individual journeys. That's got to be, you are, on top of being a reporter, you're also a storyteller. And that's a skill that, you've exhibited in multiple jobs along your career. Is that something you take a lot of pride in?
I do. And that's the secret, I think, to it all for me is storytelling. And I learned that from my news days. And I learned that just along the way, that it's not always about the X's and O's or the numbers or positioning. It's about them, because what is it? Like the average football career is like 2 years. It was 2.3 for a while and it hovered around that 2 years.
That's not long.
Is the length of the average football career. So you've got to, I think, be able to understand that these guys may come and go, but they put everything into realizing that dream. That's why I like draft night so much. I love to watch the draft because you're looking at these backstories. You're, getting into what these guys have dreamt of since they were little bitty kids. And some nights it doesn't work out for a player. Their name isn't called. But I really think it's cool to hear the backstories of what some of these guys are doing and have done throughout their lives. And then putting it all together on draft night, and then, their careers are to start. So there's a build. Half the time, some of the personal stuff is not going to make the air.
Right.
Sometimes you got to be ready in case it does, in case, the game flows in a certain way. It's always something that you should have in your pocket, but it's also something you should be curious about, want to know about, and be interested in.
Totally. Yeah. And that's so true too. You see the origin story, you see these guys getting drafted and realizing their dreams, and that's just the beginning. And a lot of these guys come into the league and say, I want to win a Super Bowl. You have covered multiple Super Bowls. You've covered so many games. Is there one game that you look at and say, this is one of the most memorable experiences of my career? And I know that's hard to do. It's like saying, oh, what's,
Yeah, what's your favorite kid?
Yeah.
It's not that I've taken them for granted, but each one is so special. Of the Super Bowls, they're so special. But I've appreciated many of, wild card weekends, and I just love football. So whether it's week 7 or playoff time or a Super Bowl matchup, I just love football. So it's hard for me to pick, but I've done some really, really exciting ones. Giants, Patriots. I'm not just saying that because I'm on this. That Super Bowl was truly exciting with, helmet catch and all that. That was a really fun one to cover, but they've all just been really, really special. And if you don't appreciate the bigness of those kind of games, not from a standpoint where you're freaking yourself out, but you're I always take a minute to look around and take in the environment. No matter what kind of week it is, week 1, week 13, last week of the season, I always take time to literally look around the building I'm at and take it in. Just take it in. The smell of grass, the pyrotechnics. That's when I really get going. If they were to play Welcome to the Jungle before all of that, that's when I'm beside myself. So yeah, those things they're amazing, but it's hard to hone in on one particular Super Bowl.
Absolutely. One of the other elements too that doesn't get talked about enough, I think, in the world of sideline reporting, especially in the NFL, is just that the elements, the weather. You know, being out there for a game, whether it is cold, it is windy, it is rainy, it is snowing, your face is cold. I mean, I've been on the sidelines for a few games at Giant Stadium where I've thought, this is it. This is where I go. Like I will not survive this.
I know. I'm on Amazon on Monday. I'm looking at the forecast. I'm ordering stuff to have shipped to the hotel. I really kind of panic when I look at the forecast, and it's anything really in the 30s or below, even the 30s, kind of. You know, because it depends on wind chill and all of those things too. But the elements, like if you're doing a game in Green Bay in December, the elements are part of the story. You know, some teams can handle it better than others. I always marveled at how the Packers were able to play. And then I know they're used to it, but they're still normal people, you know, and I've never quite understood that, but been in a number of situations where I was just frozen, solid.
Yeah.
And, you know, people like, come over here, get by the heater. Big mistake, because then all you want to do is stay by the heater, and when you can't be by the heater, you just freeze up. But I'm not fond of cold weather, but like a rain game, those games are fun, as long as the temperature is in normal range. But those games are hysterical, you know, because you're sitting there. It's like, you know, somebody wants to pull out an umbrella. It's hard to work around an umbrella. So you just kind of throw that thing to the side and get out there and, you know, be with it, because that's a part of the story as well, is how some teams handle the weather better than others. But sideline reporting, you know the drill. It's a crapshoot, basically. For me, it is. Anyway, it's a total crapshoot on how it's going to go.
It's so true. And you just got to buckle up and embrace it, especially with the elements, man. It can be so cold sometimes out there. But it is, like you said, part of the story. And I always wonder, like we talk about how, oh, these teams, the Green Bay Packers, they're used to it. Well, what if one of the guys on the Packers is from Atlanta, is from Florida? Yeah. It doesn't mean, you know, just because he plays there now.
I mean, traded from the Dolphins or something.
Right.
Going into that situation. Yeah.
Right.
It's tough, but that's why coaches actually address it in team meetings. You know, it's going to be cold. It's cold for everybody. You hear those same old kind of cliches, but that's, you know, when it's a situation where weather could be a factor, you have to address it. It's like the elephant in the room. You can't ignore it, you know, because remember how Tom Coughlin wouldn't wear a coat? He would just wear like a jacket, and then he'd look like a tomato head. Yeah. Basically. Yeah. His face is all red, but he was trying to get that message through that you have to get over the elements.
Yeah. It's like, it's a mental toughness thing. It's like the times that you see the, you know, linemen going in the short sleeves and 10 below, and it's like,
I'll never understand that.
That can't be fun. That can't be fun. No. But, you know, Pam, you are such a pioneer and a groundbreaker in this industry, and you have been around for so long. And that's one of the things too, especially for women in this field, in this visual medium. There's often this narrative that, oh, there's a shelf life for women, that after a certain point, you know, there's a turning of the tides. But what is the key in your eyes to longevity, and not just longevity, but longevity at a high level, at a successful level, like you've been able to do?
And, you know, at a certain age, I feel great. I still love it as much as I did in the beginning, but you have to have, I think, you have to establish some sort of track record, and you have to establish that you're still up for the task. And I'm surprised basically at my longevity, because this business can be cruel, but I will take it. You know, I'm really proud of having that longevity, but, you know, people are always asking me, oh, I heard you're going to retire. When are you going to retire? Oh, you know, should you retire? And I hate that question. I go around asking you when you're going to retire.
Right.
When it happens, you'll know it. It'll be on social media. It'll be on whatever. It can be on any kind of outlet. social media, I'm not participating in I've never joined that cult. I'm serious. I'm kidding. Never joined that. But yeah, I understand people, these kids, they call me, yes, Miss Pam, yes, Miss Oliver. And ma'am is my favorite. And well, they grow up watching me. I was born, 15, 20 years before, they were born 15, 20 years before as I'm, embarking on my career. So I don't participate in that conversation from the standpoint of it being a topic.
Yeah.
I appreciate the question from you. I'm not saying, I thought that was a very good question, because obviously if you're in it for over 30, almost 30 years at one place, I did have that, 9-year span where I was in news. That's a long career.
Yeah.
And I know that, and I don't take it for granted, again, because I love the sport and I'm fortunate, but my primary appreciation is my love for journalism. I can't get enough of it. So
yeah,
I'm always trying to find new ways and always trying to find new avenues, and other things. But this is my gig. It's, what floats my boat. And, I'm really happy to have been involved this long.
Absolutely. And almost 30 years at one place, you're clearly doing something right. And I love to see it. I'm so thrilled to continue to watch you on the sidelines this season coming up. And before we let you go, I just have to ask, when you look to some of the younger men and women coming up in this industry, and the people that would look to follow in your footsteps, what's one piece of advice that you wish you had earlier?
That it's okay to make mistakes. Even now, make plenty of them. I make plenty of mistakes, but it's okay to make a mistake. But what the challenge is, you got to put it behind you. It's got to be in the ozone. You got to be a defensive back. Somebody makes a good play on you, you have to erase it and go on. So I always tell them to, find something in failure that you'll learn from the next time. Or why did that happen? What made me not get in all the information I wanted to? We have somebody that goes back and reviews our games and, Pam halftime report and add a little comment or something. I can't wait for that, because when you've made a mistake and that you got to move on and got a whole game to do. So I still practice that, and it's always some advice I want to share with younger people.
Absolutely. That's a great way to look at it. Just live to see another down, put it behind you, and keep it moving forward. Pam Oliver, thank you so much for sharing your story and your time with us
really
today.
Enjoyed it.
It has
it's
been
a nice
such
conversation.
A treat. Thank you so much. It has been such a treat to chat with you and to get to know you on this episode of Her Playbook. That's a wrap for us today. Pam, it has been a pleasure.